Hello everyone, and welcome to Sunday Morning Coffee with Book Passage, a weekly show where we collect all our favorite moments from last week's free author interviews. If at any point in the video you decide you'd like to see the entire conversation with the author and not just the couple minutes we've selected for you, at the top right-hand corner of each clip we've pinned a link to the original video. Just click the image that looks like an eye and select the appropriate author from the sidebar. Thank you for joining us for Sunday Morning Coffee. We really appreciate it. Now on to the show.
The A's did not make the playoffs in 1999, but my sports editor at the San Francisco Examiner, Glenn Schwartz, Shelley, you know him.
He was mine too.
Yeah.
Legend.
He was a ball guy. Budget be damned. He was sending his A's and Giants beat writers to cover the league championship series. In 1999, that meant John Shea drew Braves Mets. It meant I drew Red Sox Yankees. It meant I drew my new best ball writer friend, Pedro Gomez, in baseball's best city, in baseball's most hallowed stadium, in baseball's greatest month. I can still hear Pedro. My Irish amigo, let's go to Yankee Stadium. I'll meet you in the Grand Hyatt lobby. Okay. I can still see Pedro in his coat and tie, laptop satchel over his shoulder, bright white teeth smiling under those eyebrows, waiting for me in the lobby. His smile was for Yankees Red Sox. His smile was for October. His smile was for the excitement of showing his rookie ball writer pal the way to do it, the Pedro way. So the Pedro way was the number 4 subway, of course. The Pedro way was to feel the pregame energy through the jostling crowds of Yankee fans in O'Neill t-shirts and El Duque jerseys, crammed together in the train and spilling out into the Bronx, where we smelled the sausages and onions from street vendors and felt the chill of the night air and saw the brightness of the stadium lights against a dark Gotham sky. The Red Sox and Yankees in October strained credulity. We drew the 2 most storied teams in the game. I had a sensei like Pedro to show me the way in, to take me to the packed press room downstairs, and to make sure all the New York writers and broadcasters, George King, Joel Sherman, Tyler Kepner, Michael Kay, Susan Waldman, on, knew that the new kid from the San Francisco Examiner was okay. Pre- and post-game press conferences are run by the American League and their venerable and respected director of public relations, Phyllis Marriage. Phyllis was like the White House press secretary, only more important, because it was the stadium in October. Phyllis, whatever you do, don't take any questions from Murphy from the San Francisco Examiner. Pedro needled, eyes glinting. This Mick is trouble. Stay away, Phyllis. That was all Phyllis needed to hear. She winked and made sure to call on me. Game 1 was everything. Extra innings, Bob Shepard on the PA, Eddie Layton on the organ, a controversial blown call against the Red Sox, a walk-off home run by Bernie Williams, Frank Sinatra, Frank Sinatra, Frank Sinatra. I figured the press conferences with Yankee manager Joe Torre and Red Sox manager Jimmy Williams would do the trick for quotes, not knowing clubhouse access in October. Pedro wanted more. Make sure you get Rod back after the game, Pedro urged. Speaking of the ex-Giant who surrendered Williams' blast. He'll be in the clubhouse for sure. Squeeze in there. Old Shooter Beck was a stand-up guy, sure enough. I can still feel the crush of bodies around his locker, can still see the beer in his hand, still hear his disappointed yet patient voice explaining the one that got away. That advice made my story. An adrenalized write for sure. Heady stuff. Filed to the Examiner around 1 a.m. Eastern. Ready to go? Pedro asked, a few laptops over. Where to? I asked, still dazed from the drama, the lights, the scene. Dude, come on. It's New York in October. And off we went.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome, Brian.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Here's an audacious and incongruous comparison. 5 things I, the partially paralyzed polio survivor, have in common with Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimming champ. Number 1, we have the same arm span to height ratio. The length of our outstretched arms measured to our middle fingertips is greater than our height, though his difference is about 6 inches and mine is less, naturally. This monkey arm ratio is unusual and useful for powerful swimming. In my case, the reason this probably happened is that I was meant to be 2 inches taller. If my right leg had not been stunted by polio, I would likely have grown to that height. Number 2, our favorite stroke is the butterfly, 'cause long arms. I love to watch Phelps' signature propulsion dolphin kick, which I can't quite do, but sometimes modify my kick to imitate. Number 3, we count strokes, which is useful when your goggles get water in them or whenever you cannot see the end of the pool. You can also use counting to keep from hitting your head when on your back. Counting is almost imperative if you want to be competitive, which I don't. Number 4, when we're not swimming as a practice, we don't enjoy going in oceans, rivers, lakes, or other pools for fun because we already spend so much time in water working out, and being wet for a couple of hours a day is fun enough. Number 5, we have both smoked pot. Me in the past, and him, maybe not just the past. No judgment. That's it. But given you'd think we'd have a little in common, that we would have little in common at all, it's a lot, isn't it?
I for the longest time wanted to tell the story of a cohort of Indians that came of age in the early 70s that were very different from the members of their family. Enough time had passed since the independence, since the partition of India, and so the conservative, cautious mindset of families had given way to allowing their children to develop into and follow paths of their choosing. And a lot of us set forth to try to live our imagined lives, essentially to try to live like Americans, with no constraints, in pursuit of whatever dreams. And a lot of us had an idea of America, whether it was an idea inspired by Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, or Dylan and Joplin. It was different strokes for different people. And I wanted to give voice to that Indian because there are several of us around the world. And over the years, I found that it was not just the Indians that formed this cohort, but it was a global English-speaking state of mind, almost a nation state of mind that was inspired by the same things, really responding to it was an echo of the anti-Vietnam protests in America in the late 60s, early 70s. And the music of protest and the spirit of revolution that was sweeping the globe, along with the possibilities that came about. So, I want to write about that. And I also want to write a story coming from a large family. A lot of us have stories within us about people who are getting old. And I wanted to capture some of those stories before it was too late. And as my business career progressed, I thought, well, there's so many stories I want to tell about the intrigues of corporate life and the compromises of corporate life. And then I landed smack in the middle of a revolution. So I said, well, as I reflected on what I had been through, both the Sybaritic times under the Shah, just the high life where Tehran was one of the hot spots of the world, along with Havana and Beirut and Rio. It was one of these watering holes, and then suddenly it was a place you had to get out of, in a hurry. So those four ideas were in my head, and so I said, well, and I said, well, why not sit down and find some time to write about them? And eventually I got that chance.
That's a great question, and I don't think, you're making me think about it in the frame of belonging, which is so interesting to me because, so much of the story was born out of things I witnessed and thought about growing up in India. So, one of the characters, Lovely, she is marginalized in really complex ways, and she is somebody who is told that she has a certain place in society, and her dreams have to be very limited, and she kind of defies that. She has this wild dream of being a movie star, and she goes to these acting classes, and so belonging in her life is something that she has to fight for. And she's also somebody who, an aspect of her which was present from very, very early drafts for me, is that she's somebody who is not interested in book learning. She's not interested in books, and she kind of, disdains them, and she makes fun of them. And I think that came to me from when I was a kid, and I would go to school on the school bus, and out the window of the school bus, I would see other kids my age who were washing dishes in the gutter by the roadside because they worked at those little roadside restaurants. Or, we would have to, in those days, we didn't buy so many like ready-made clothes. We would go to a shop to buy fabric and then go to a tailor and have it made. And so when you went to the tailor's apprentice would be a kid around my age. And so I realized very early that there are people for whom, books are not a big part of their lives. Going to school and studying for exams, all of the things that were so basic and central for me were not so for them. And I realized the profound injustice of simply being born into a class of society where you don't have these opportunities, where school is not something you can take for granted. And so, those thoughts, I think, bled into the book, which is so concerned with, moving up in society. What does that look like? Who has the opportunity to get ahead? Who has the opportunity to have big ambitions, and who finds themselves constantly thwarted?
Everything in a natural system is connected. This isn't a platitude. It's the principle that explains how a mineral orb, wheeling through the vacuum of space, became wrapped in creatures, became a biosphere with mushrooms that glow in the dark, kaleidoscopic dancing spiders, puppies and kittens, 6-foot-long salamanders that both bark and mew, Komodo dragons that reproduce by virgin births, jellyfish capable of reversing the aging process and existing forever, chimpanzees with nearly 99% of the same genes we own, making tools in an African woodland, and so many microbes that they outnumber the stars in the known universe. That's life. And that's the subject of this book, is the nature of life, of nature of nature, and how we think about it. It's entitled 4/5 the Grizzly, but it's not all about grizzlies. So grizzlies are sort of an icon for me. I do live in grizzly country. I've watched them from the Rockies to Alaska, to the top of the Himalayas, to the Gobi Desert, where the last 3 to 4 dozen grizzly bears amazingly exist among wild camels and snow leopards. But the book is, as I said, it's not 4/5 about grizzlies. And it refers to the fact that I am 4/5 a grizzly, which means I'm also 4/5 a polar bear, because grizzlies and polar bears are so close that they can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. But hey, I'm 4/5 an elephant and a bat. Well, bats aren't the most charming thing, but I'm also 4/5 a red panda over in the mountains of Eastern Asia. And I'm proud to say I'm about 98 to 99% this chimpanzee, nesting in a tree. So those are my kin. There are about 4,600 species of mammals, and I share at least 80% of my genes with all of them. They're identical. And what I didn't realize till I started poking around a little more is that I am also 60 to 65% a fish. I am 30 to 40+% an insect. I share identical genes with them. And if you look at the forest in the background, I am 20 to 30% a tree, a shrub, a plant. I'm specifically 24% a wine grape and about 30% a banana. That's who we are. We share the same metabolic processes, the same conditions, the same molecules that make for the conditions of life. And we are kin. And in fact, I share 7% of my genetic makeup with bacteria.
Well, if you're going to publish a book called No Spring Chicken, you, of course, have to ask, why did the chicken cross the road?
Yes, exactly. But that's not the question I want to answer right now.
Of course, I already blew it.
Right now. Why did the chicken go to a seance?
Why did the chicken go to the seance?
To get to the other side. What do you get when you cross a chicken with a 4-leaf clover?
Oh no, what do you get when you cross the chicken with a 4-leaf clover?
The cluck of the Irish. What do you get when you cross a ghost with a chicken?
What do you get when you cross a ghost with a chicken?
A poultrygeist.
These are even just a tiny bit physically painful, Francine, just a little bit.